Welcome. My name is Melita Pachulia, and I'm pleased to moderate today's webinar on behalf of the Stockholm Center for Research and Innovation Security at the Institute for Security and Development Policy. This session is part of our Research and Innovation series organized by the Stockholm Center for Research and Innovation Security. The webinar series promotes dialogue on research, innovation, and security and explores the institutional policy factors shaping contemporary security developments. We welcome participants from academia, policy, and practice to contribute to this discussion. Across Europe, digital infrastructure has become central to governance, economic resilience, and national security. Today, we focus on Estonia's experience in cybersecurity and digital resilience and the broader lessons this holds for Europe. Estonia's transformation is particularly remarkable given its trajectory since the restoration of independence in 1991. Over the past 3 decades, Estonia has built modern digital institutions largely from the ground up, demonstrating how strategic vision, institutional trust, and sustained political commitment can reinforce resilience. We are pleased to welcome Siim Aladalu, Project Manager at the Estonian Center for International Development Cooperation and Non-Resident Research Fellow at the International Center for Defense and Security, contributing to the Tallinn Digital Summit program. His background includes leadership roles in Estonia's cyber ecosystem and significant contributions in European and NATO's cyber cooperation, including shaping EU cyber policy during Estonia's 2017 EU Council presidency. It's a pleasure to have him with us today. Before we begin, a brief note on structure. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on ISDP's YouTube channel, so anyone interested can revisit it anytime. The session will start with a presentation by Siim, followed by some questions by me, and then we will open the floor for audience questions. Please feel free to ask questions in our the Q&A function at any point during the webinar. Siim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Melita, and thank you for the kind introduction and pleasure to see such a growing crowd participating in this webinar. So we have roughly 1 hour to spend, and speaking from experience, I know that time flies in good company. So without much further ado, I will kick on the slides, and just to highlight that this particular presentation will be done in the context of my being the non-resident fellow at the International Center for Defense and Security in Tallinn. And I will now try and share the screen with you, and it worked in the testing phase. Let's see if it also works in the so-called production phase. So here we go. And I don't see you, but Melita just
it works. It works.
It works. Excellent. So cybersecurity and digital resilience, two increasingly used buzzwords. This presentation will be designed as an academic overview by nature. My background includes some roles also in a practitioner role, but please take it as one of the perspectives from Estonia. And what I will speak about will basically fall into 3 bigger chapters or parts of the presentation. First, how is the cybersecurity situation in Estonia? Then secondly, what did we learn? So what were our first lessons learned from the Russian war of Ukraine, which also changed quite a bit in not only Estonian or European or Ukrainian cybersecurity, but I believe also more widely. And the third part will be dedicated to giving an overview about the different initiatives that Estonia is using to build and enforce our cyber resilience. So maybe this could be something that we could later discuss on. But of course, feel free to discuss and ask questions about any of those 3 topics. And so moving on to the first part. So Estonia is one of the more digitalized nations in the world. I will not ask you to memorize all the numbers here. Basically, I think it all sums up in a message in the lower part of the slide. Most of public services, most of habits that the Estonians have in consuming public services and also doing business are done online, of course, and perhaps the most remarkable and enduring feature is that it comes down to democracy. So we had our last parliamentary elections 3 years ago, and it was confirmed that 51% of the voters used e-voting. And that is quite remarkable. Now, Estonia's e-voting system was designed for Estonia by Estonians, so it is not yet replicated much around the world. But it is, I think the figure of 51 shows that the Estonian public certainly has chosen to go forward with this particular solution. And also here are some of the other figures which just reinforce the point that Estonia is not only the way of life, so anything from exercising democracy to consuming public services. Also, much of Estonia's current economy is based on different kinds of e-solutions, tools, services, to which cybersecurity then plays sort of the second side of the same coin. And there are also some tangible, measurable effects which we have benefited or which we have taken note of. So, for instance, this overall, it's exactly hard to put a number on it, but it is guess estimated, at least for the past decade, that Estonia's e-way of life has saved us more than at least 1% of GDP, which could then be invested into other areas of life. We have also been able to attract an increasing number of e-residents from around the world, so making Estonia bigger by way of having entrepreneurial spirits join us, pay taxes in Estonia, and run companies normally designed for a worldwide audience, but based legally in Estonia. And Estonia's government and the Estonian budget has also made its gains from it. More interestingly is that Estonia is also trying to use all the different e-services, is quite efficient in terms of collecting taxes. And last but not least, coming back to the exercise of democracy online voting, it is much cheaper as such compared to the exercise of voting on paper. And as a personal example, last week I had the opportunity to observe elections in another country outside Europe, and I was actually quite surprised to see how much elections as such would cost the ordinary taxpayer. So the figures here, Estonia versus regular votings in Europe, but the figures they showed us in another country were actually some 3 times bigger. So democracy is a costly thing if you want to exercise it. So running e-voting actually helps to save money as such. But moving on to cybersecurity, here is a graph of Estonia, how in Estonia we exercise the management of cybersecurity. There is one thing I would need to edit, so any viewers now or any viewers on YouTube later, just pay attention that the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications is no longer in charge of cybersecurity in Estonia. That function was moved to the Ministry of Justice and Digital Affairs a year and a half ago. Otherwise, you see on this graph the main milestones of how the administration of cybersecurity has evolved in Estonia over time. And you may have heard of the 2007 cyber attacks against Estonia. These were a catalyst and a mobilization point for the efforts. So ever since 2008, the first cybersecurity strategy, every few years we have added new capacities to the mix, and then the most recent change enforced in 2024. But overall, as you can see, the number of agencies that have a role to play in the administration of cybersecurity is not that big. It it includes civilian agencies, most importantly RIA, the Estonian Information System Authority, also the Defense Forces. The EDF Cyber Command has its role to play. We have a dedicated training facility called Foundation CR14, which serves not only Estonian organizations but also more widely, and then everything, of course, can be, when the situation so requires, be run by the government of Estonia itself. Very quickly about the cyber defense ecosystem, you see on this sort of a general's coin 4 bigger players, starting from the top right corner, the EDF Cyber Command, then moving on to the NATO Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. We also have a voluntary cyber defense league, which brings together volunteers from all walks of life, and then the CR14, which provides the training grounds. So this is sort of the active reserve or the more defensive part of Estonia's cybersecurity ecosystem. And moving on then to the main thrust of the presentation, very quickly to highlight, and there is a better source and more comprehensive source for all the details available now. The Cybersecurity Yearbook of 2025 was published just a couple of weeks ago by RIA, but here is a snapshot and overview of perhaps the bigger trends and what has changed. So for several years, going back to 2022, so that was, I would say, before the war broke out by Russia in Ukraine, we were used to having years of denial of service attacks. So all this E-Estonia, it doesn't, I would say, survive in peace. There has always been somebody or somebodies who has tried to damage Estonia's cybersecurity, so attacks against government networks, against the public services online. They have been there all along. But there has been a bigger change now in the last year towards a year of fraud. So it is not just about exhausting the technical resources, but it's now going after each individual who is using the Estonian ecosystem and trying to basically very straightforwardly trying to steal money from people by using online attack vectors. However, at the same time, the overwhelming number of attacks as such has always been related to Russia. So from Russia, from its government-operated units or so-called patriotic hackers, you name it. And that sort of background has been looming, and it just grew remarkably in size ever since the attack on Ukraine. More interestingly, Estonia has also been targeted by parties who have perhaps mistakenly considered that Estonia had its role to play in the Israel-Hamas war. But at the same time, there have also been a large role played by human errors and data leaks, as well as legacy code-related abuses, ransomware, and more importantly, a security vulnerabilities as such. So a global feature which has been growing in importance also in Estonia. Now, very quickly, just to highlight this with graphs, and as mentioned, if you go to RIA, you can download the latest yearbook with the exact data. Here you see a graphic overview how the number of incidents with an impact has grown in the last couple of years. And just to compare years 2023, which you see on the right, to year 2025, if I take a step quickly back, you see that what used to be mostly about phishing, more than half of these incidents were about phishing. and to a lesser part about fraud. Now it is almost half of the attacks have been about fraud, followed by phishing. So what we can derive from that is really that the aggressor or the cyber attacker doesn't really go after Estonia as a nation, but it actually goes after each Estonian or every user of the government's public services that the E-Estonia enables. But of course, not only individuals, but also companies, private sector, public sector, you name it, they don't really discriminate. And also, as mentioned before, the number of vulnerabilities. So unpatched vulnerabilities, faults in the code, stuff like that, technical stuff could be based on a globally, available software which has had some vulnerabilities or backdoors in it. That number is also growing. Now, moving on to the second part, I will try to speed up so we will have more time for questions. Of course, Ukraine and the war in Ukraine was an alarm clock also for Estonia, perhaps not as much, because legend has it that when the war started in February, actually Estonia networks were under higher than previous intensity, that is attacks from Russia affiliated parties before that, already in January and December before that. Now, this is a good graph, and you see the sources also listed here, how in cyberspace the conflict unfolded. And you can see 3 different phases with remarkable incidents as such. And what the Ukrainians learned immediately from that conflict were the 4 things I've highlighted here: that it is best to establish a center for active countermeasures. So it's not about defense, but being able to, I would say, have an active defense or offensive capability. One would also ideally have cyber troops at hand. One would need to appoint a state authority which is responsible for the security of critical infrastructure. And last but not least, one should implement a vulnerability detection system. And interestingly, well, these are lessons learned by Ukrainians, but these also relate to what I will say about Estonia in the coming slides. So what are the measures that we are employing? Here is a more generic slide which puts the war in Ukraine and the more active Russia in cyberspace into a broader European context. What we, on one hand, could see that cyber security and cyber defense wasn't only related to the civilian sector, so public services which you use on a daily basis, but also the full battlefield. So conventional military and conventional warfare has by now been digitalized. And in ordinary cyberspace, we could see that the attacks or the targeting continued to focus on Ukraine's main supporters around the world, especially in the EU, Poland and the Baltic states, United Kingdom and the United States. And secondly, the attacker didn't really discriminate any sector, so it continued to target all the sectors that it could target. And also the main tactics, techniques, and procedures have been listed here. But the good news is that, as also declared in the findings of RIA, 2025, in fact, was the first year since the start of the invasion where Ukraine did not suffer a cyber attack with a major societal impact. So my point here, and long story short, is really that the measures that we identified in the previous slides, in the first, I would say, lessons learned from the war, they seem to work. So, and maybe this is a good takeaway for also other countries. So having those pillars in place would serve your nation, your national cybersecurity, if not international cybersecurity, also in times of war and armed conflict. And then that brings me to the last part of the slide. So here are some of the things that we employ in Estonia as a measure to enhance our cybersecurity and cyber resilience. And everything starts with raising awareness. Now, RIA as a central agency, but also, of course, other, especially government entities, they need to follow suit. RIA has been in charge and responsible for raising awareness at least since 2019. So I used to work at RIA at the time, and I know firsthand how these campaigns were designed. And these awareness campaigns in Estonia, they are on one hand they do take quite a bit of investment, but they are also very broad in nature. So there are awareness campaigns which target private persons, but not only private persons, but also groups of and the different, I would say, different groups of people in the society, parents, but not only just parents, but parents of TikTokers as such. Then there are dedicated campaigns for the public sector, and then there are dedicated campaigns for enterprises. And why enterprises is, of course, quite obvious, because inside any company, if a company is vulnerable, the management can, of course, implement some of the tools and requirements, but it always goes down to each individual employee if they are willing to do their part in defending the enterprise's cyber security, and therefore training employees and testing their awareness is very important. Just as a highlight, in Estonia, it is mandatory to take a cyber awareness test in government agencies on an annual basis. And the picture that you see here, this was a public awareness campaign dedicated to the elderly. So as you can see, the story, the video is available online, but the story is where a young boy is stopping his grandfather from clicking on unknown links and downloading malicious content because the grandpa has been targeted by a very attractive email with some good offers, but the boy is fortunately knowledgeable and can help his grandparents, and that is I would say, more broader lesson to the society as well. So awareness raising. Second thing is cyber hygiene, and as mentioned, it is mandatory to take the test at least annually for government employees. But here you see two links below. We also enable citizens and why not just Estonians, but more broadly, to test their own capabilities and understanding of the threats in cyberspace. And the mycyberhygiene.com, that was a initiative we launched. It is run by a private company. We launched it during the COVID times. And the Kybertest.ee, that is a publicly funded and implemented by RIA initiative, which they broadly serve the same cause of raising people's awareness of what are the good hygiene measures for cybersecurity in cyberspace. Then moving on, a more practical thing is a thing called Cyber Reserve. It has now been operational for a couple of years. That is, I would say, a measure how to call to duty cybersecurity experts who work in the different organizations, public sector organizations, especially the so-called IT houses or IT centers. And what you see on the picture here was an exercise where cybersecurity experts from the public sector were deployed to Estonia's biggest hospital, where the systems were placed under attack. And so it was how to restore services, from backups, provided there were backups, and so on. So Cyber Reserve is one of the tools that we also employ to really be able to rely on a broader resource of experts. Then there is continuous red teaming. This is a bit more sensitive, so I won't go into too much details here. But essentially, it is the philosophy here is that we shouldn't wait for an opponent or an outside party to try and test our system with hostile intent. It is better if we actually have our own experts, so working for a reliable organization by the government, to test the vulnerability, to test how resilient the systems around the society are. And I would say the development of this service is ongoing. Then we should also mention the legal framework. As of January this year, we have a new Cybersecurity Act. It is based on the NIS2 directive. I will not go into the NIS2 directive details here, but suffice to say that there are about 6,500 agencies and companies in Estonia which are subject to the new and upgraded requirements, also from the public sector, but as well as from the private sector, and covering a very broad range of services around the society. And why this is important is that if we go back to the raising awareness of the employees who would like to do their part in all honesty and full effort, they would also need some standards that their behavior online should adhere to. So this is where the law comes to play. In addition to the new law, Estonia also has its national cybersecurity standard called the E-ITS, or Estonian Information Security Standard. It is equivalent to the ISO 27000 series of information security standard, and it is allows companies to certify themselves against the internationally or globally recognized standard. And that brings me to the last thing that we do is that we also have issued a thing called ettevõtte küberturvalisuse lühijuhend, or short guidance for cybersecurity for enterprises, and that allows every enterprise in Estonia, even if they may be under the requirements, but also if they just so choose to do, they are able to sort of put cybersecurity into their business model and implement the necessary changes, so that on one hand, their company would not be victim to the next big attack or the next big vulnerability, but also that whatever they produce or sell in terms of goods or services, that these two are also cyber secure. And last but not least, I put this slide here to just expand on the approaches as to where we are going. Cybersecurity knows no borders, and therefore Estonia is also active in the different initiatives on the European level. I just wanted to highlight one, which I think is the sort of most promising one in terms of delivering actual cybersecurity, the Cyber Solidarity Act. I've also written a paper about it for the ICDS. So if you're interested in more details, you can find the paper online at the ICDS website. But nevertheless, this on one hand would try to solve the old question: in case a country or a society is under cyber attack, can it rely on the others to come to assistance? But it also brings about practical measures such as national and cross-border security operations centers. It will thereby also build collaboration on a regional basis So Estonia, for example, will become part of a Nordic Baltic initiative. Also, the EU Cybersecurity Reserve. It is not just about the individuals who might be serving in the reserves, as it was in the case of Estonia, but companies which the so-called trusted providers that can be deployed at the request of a member state if it is under a cyber attack, and also that the mutual assistance issue from member state to member state who might be affected by a cybersecurity incident, that these things are also in development. And as an Estonian, as I would say, former practitioner in this area, I know that we have been wrestling with these questions ever since 2007. So it has taken a good almost 2 decades to come to progress. But what it shows is that cybersecurity issues they also reflect on the overall maturity and the readiness of the society. So they are part of how they sort of reflect the concerns that we have in everyday life as well. So if we are able to defend ourselves and if we're able to collaborate with others in defending ourselves and themselves. And with that, these are the slides I had. It's been a somewhat longer than planned presentation, but like I said, time flies in good company, and I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Thank you very much, and apologies for the too long time.
Thank you very much, Sim, for that insightful presentation. It's been very interesting listening, and as myself, like having followed Estonia's digital transformation with interest over the years, and including through my time spent at the University of Tartu, and also with my professional engagement, and also being part of the Tallinn Digital Summit in 2024, I have always found Estonia's experience inspiring and greatly appreciate the depth of your analysis today. And I also agree with you about that the society needs to be, the whole society needs to be part of the common strategy of developing this cyber resilience. So I would now like to move into our moderated discussion and explore several themes in some greater detail. So another important dimension is the cross-sector collaboration. How does structured public-private cooperation function within Estonia's cybersecurity ecosystem, and what lessons might be transferable to other European countries?
Yes, well, the Estonian approaches, they are designed by Estonians for Estonia first and foremost. So there is no, I'll say, ready solution that we take off the shelf and then we put it in the plane and then we can implement it in any part of the world. But I think on one hand, what is a crucial element about any cross-sectoral collaboration is being open about it. So Estonia made this conscious choice of being open about it in 2007 when we had the cyber attacks against our public services, our way of life, and on one hand, cyber attacks at the time weren't anything new, but what was new was that we chose to speak about it. So raise a technical issue to the government level and also be open about it. So being open about it is, in our case, it's part of the DNA. And if you are open about it, you also they like it or they don't like it, but you educate the society. If you speak about a technical issue and you make people recognize that it will play a role in anyone's life eventually. And the past 2 decades, ever since, they have just confirmed that, and we are in any society, we are moving to a more digitalized way of life, and therefore discussing these issues, educating people, and being open about these are the I'd say cornerstones. But cross sectoral collaboration, Estonia also. I mean, this is academic presentation, and I'm how to say, not hesitating to say that Estonia is not having any silos or any very rigidly determined areas of life or spheres of governance. And what we do to overcome these, I mean, very broadly, the broadest division can be drawn if this is a civilian sector and this is a military sector, for example. So how we cross these borders is by exercising. Therefore, Estonia also invests quite a bit of time and money and human resource into running cyber security and cyber defense exercises. So there is, I dare say that at least every month there is something going on in one or another sector where people are coming together and trying to solve a cybersecurity incident or a problem or a quiz. And there has been quite a lot of time invested also to doing this on from the early years on. So there are hacking competitions, hackathons, more sophisticated exercises already in the school levels, not to mention university competitions, but also competitions which go all the way to the government level, and of course, thereby bridging the different silos or pillars in the society.
Yeah, thanks. So I also would like to ask about some challenges. What do you see like for sustaining the digital resilience over the next decade? What do you see as the most significant challenge amid the hybrid threats and technological acceleration?
Yeah, well, if this is an old example, but it maybe even 10 years ago, I remember one discussion in the NATO context where it was characterized that the Chinese focus on quantity and the Russians focus on quality. So just to, I would say, differentiate what the two countries might be as opponents, like in the cyberspace. Now, what we have seen as a challenge is really where the two characters or the two qualities meet. So attacks which could exhaust your systems like DDoS versus attacks which really go to the heart of your systems, like comparing to sleeping agents, so to say. So you have operators, hostile operators, who make a way to systems, and then they just sit in there and observe your activities. They don't let you know that they're in. So these quite old and known procedures and tactics, today the challenge is that they have merged into one, and there is everything just might happen at a shorter notice, do more harm, and you really need to be creative, more creative than ever before in mobilizing your resources. And this sort of a challenge where you have to fight the enemy on all fronts without knowing their intent and without knowing their exact location. This is a known problem in many cybersecurity exercises, and maybe one of the lessons learned has been that it is not about having huge numbers of experts who are able to work with DDoS, or huge numbers of analysts, or huge numbers of whoever. The key is to have as many as possible people who are able to sort of orchestrate the different capacities in your defense. So sort of operators, the managers, the interpreters, who are perhaps the most needed in today's threat environment.
Thank you. So now move into our Q&A session and just ask the first question we have. Yeah, so the question is from Richard La Riviere, and he asks, how is Estonia addressing the issue of false narratives on social media and online media that look to undermine the government or divide society?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that is a challenge for any government nowadays around the world. And how Estonia works with this is like probably I alluded, but I didn't say it directly. But in Estonia, much of the effort is based on volunteerism of the people. So we have also volunteer or organized groups of volunteers who dedicate their time and effort to working with the false narratives. So they question, like if there is a accusation against that, Estonia, like Estonia is doing this thing, and it sort of becomes a scandal, although there is no truth behind it, then there are groups of people who are able to dedicate time and to question the narrative, take it into pieces, take it into elements, and then come up with a credible response that this or that accusation simply is not true. Of course, there's always a time factor if you're able to deliver this sort of a response in a good time. And the second challenge is that there are some of the allegations could be just so plain and stupid, not realistic, that you need to ask if it is worth dealing with this particular challenge at all. Is it just so plain and stupid that you can dismiss it? And yeah, well, it is perhaps then advisable or a lesson learned from Estonia to find the people, to find those who are able to sort of fight with the false narratives. And another layer of the same challenge is that you would need to establish sort of like a network between your experts and the relevant experts in other countries, because the narratives hardly nowadays target only Estonia. If they target Estonia, then in my view, they are for local consumption only, but they might also be playing the same narrative with some shades in multiple countries at the same time, and then the orchestrator of the campaign would just sort of would test and would see in which country this narrative works the best. So yes, organizing your national capabilities and then organizing your national capabilities to work with the similar capabilities cross border, I think that's the solution here.
Yeah, thank you. So next question, Nerea Alvarez. In Estonia, ethnic Russians comprise roughly 20% of the population, while 28% of the total population are Russian speakers. How does this exposure influence Estonian public sentiment toward Russia? And is the nation's resilience holding firm despite, or perhaps because of these pressures?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be able to argument with the statistics. So inside the so-called Russian-speaking part of the population, there are not only Russians, but also Ukrainians, Belarusians, possibly other groups of people. So it's quite diverse on one hand. At the other hand, the language is not a indicator. So we cannot assume that anyone who speaks Russian is also subject or who believes in the false narratives. So we take, I would say, a very pragmatic approach. At least my experience formerly in the public sector has been we take a very pragmatic approach. We have already, yeah, it was after the 2007 attacks, we invested into Russian language public TV channels because already back then it was evident that the Russian Russia-based TV channels weren't only producing propaganda for internal consumptions, but also cross-border. So we have been sort of spreading the understanding and the news about Estonia also in two languages for the past 2 decades. On the other hand, what we did, when I say we, then I broadly speak as Estonia. So what we did after the full-scale aggression in Ukraine, we also cut down on the licensing of the propaganda channels in Russia, which until then had quite a free room to maneuver. And we have also been quite efficient in implementing what the law says about hostile propaganda. So there have been cases where people who have been caught red-handed sowing hatred and discontent based on Russian propaganda, that there has been law enforcement dealing with them. So overall, I wouldn't overemphasize the language issue. I wouldn't draw borders inside Estonian society based on what language people speak at home. Like, for example, I've had my military refreshment trainings where I've had a deputy whose mother tongue is Russian, but we speak Estonian between ourselves. He's a patriot. He serves in the same cause as I do as a reservist. So yeah, maybe this argument that Estonia is divided in two, Estonians and Russians, that may have been easily implementable back in the early 90s, but today I dare say it is less of a problem, if a problem at all.
Thank you. So next question from the anonymous attendee, and the attendee asking, coming from Germany, the biggest problem I see is that many European citizens are skeptical of government data centralization. What specific policy safeguards did Estonia implement to ensure the public felt their data was a private asset rather than a state surveillance tool?
I think that it is best to comment on that one based on the Estonia's historic experience. So because we had 50 years without a Estonian government or Estonian state, then as a result, sort of, Estonian public institutions, just to mention maybe the police or the defense forces or the president, they have always enjoyed very high public support and very high trust in them. So bluntly saying, any institution or any individual might have problems, but in the end of the day, they are the one institutions and the one government and the one person that we have. So there is really no choice on if to trust and how much to trust if there is no alternative or there is no other Estonia. So I think, therefore, as mentioned, the solutions that Estonia is implementing, they are designed by Estonians for Estonia, and they are having the same philosophy that eventually there is one Estonia, and in Estonia we trust. So the question of whether we trust our data with the government, it has also been, I think, quite well regulated. For example, the X-road system, which is sort of the backbone for the E-Estonia, all the public services, whenever a government authority, and normally there's somebody working in a government authority, accesses the data that you have entrusted to the state, there remains I would say, a note. So, for example, if I log in and I check who has been accessing my data, that means my name, my date of birth, my address, my marital status, my driver's license expiry, whatever is included, my medical records, I can have access to the full log of events. So I can see, okay, my family doctor has accessed my medical record, or uh, another government agency has accessed my date of birth, and so on. So this, on one hand, we trust the government with our data, but there is also the mechanism that we see who exactly, when, and for what purpose has accessed them. And if we have a reason to be concerned that this accessing of my data has not been legal, or I would just like to know why, then there are, I would say, the procedures in place how to do that. And in the end of the day, there are also fines for misconduct. So, for example, if hypothetically, if a government employee wants to check how much property his neighbor has, and he goes to the land registry, uh, these sorts of out of curiosity inquiries, these are not legal, and they can be punished and fined, and quite heftily fined.
Thanks. So next question from Matilde Huart. Following the model of Estonian cybersecurity strategy, what can be the different perspectives for the implementation of a global European cybersecurity strategy outside of those mentioned? Would it be better to design policies for all member states or a global initiative?
Well, overall, I think European Union as such, so we still need to distinguish between EU countries and European countries. But overall, all the EU approaches, they are designed as, to allow Europe to speak the same language and the same voice. And the challenge with that is really the if I take a step back, when Estonia was having its first EU presidency in 2017. So just before the presidency, there were two big cyber attacks. One was NotPetya, and the other one was WannaCry. So WannaCry, I think, was launched by North Korea, and NotPetya by Russia. Different malware attacks, but equally global in their reach. And it was, I would say, an interesting moment where, for the past 4 years already, European Union had its strategy outlining that we should have cooperation mechanisms which would bring together the government certs from all EU member states. And up until that moment, so almost 3 years later, that was the first time that actually we brought together this teacher network, and we were, I would say, placed in the right moment, and we got lucky with that because we could, thanks to activating the same cooperation mechanism, we could at least save some of the member states from damages, because member states at the time did not have the equal capabilities yet. So over the past decade or so, as the EU has put a lot of effort into bringing the member states onto the same page on one hand, on the technological side, so having the capacities, the approaches in the member states follow the same logic, and having the same resources, but having a sort of a European solution on a global scale. I think it's very difficult to achieve it, activate or implement it in the same time. We have seen, I would say, challenges activate at the same time. If you recall last year, believe it was in November, there was this Cloudflare outing, which meant that, for example, airports had to cancel flight because the relevant systems went offline. So how do you fight with such outbreaks across the continent with the same measure and with the same approach? It is quite difficult to achieve. So the best we can do, I think, is to keep the information going, and then trust that all the member states see threats and the landscape of threats the same way. Because if even if there is such a global outbreak, it doesn't mean that all the normal challenges against the member states go away and give space to solving the one global attack. It's a perhaps a vague answer, but I try as best as I can to describe what could be the dilemma if you work in a government agency responsible for cybersecurity on a 24/7 basis.
Yes, thank you very much. So today's discussion has reinforced that digital resilience is not simply a technical achievement, but it also rests on governance, capacity, and institutional trust, and also the cross-sector cooperation. And Estonia offers a remarkable example of how a country within a relatively short period in contemporary history after gaining the independence has managed to build strong institutions and a highly advanced digital society. The ability to find strength and resilience during the difficult moments and transform those challenges into a success story is truly inspiring. So as today's discussion has shown, this kind of transformation requires the engagement of the whole of society, institutions, the private sector, the citizens working together toward the shared vision. And we saw the Estonia's experience, and which offers an instructive reference point for European policymakers and countries, demonstrating how innovation and institutions can work together to strengthen resilience. So I would really thank you, Sim, for your presentation and for your engagement and for your expertise today, and all participants for engaging in the discussion. As mentioned before, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded on our YouTube channel. And we will continue our research innovation series on March 31st, focusing on UK perspectives on research and innovation security. We will share also upcoming webinars, and just please stay tuned. Thank you again for your participation, and I look forward to continuing conversation in the future. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.